had a very strict, old-fashioned Italian teacher that would call him James Joyce, because he refused to pronounce it in the English way. So it was James Joyce. I read James Joyce.
What is the most memorable conversation that you've had about James Joyce?
Well, the last one, probably. No, I'll tell you why. Because I'm actually a part of different reading groups with an association which is based in Dublin, Sweeney's, and basically, you know it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I had been there a few years ago physically. I had actually read with them, but I'm very shy, or I used to be very shy. And actually, I'm in 3 different groups reading Ulysses in 3 different languages at 3 different stages. And it's a cycle. So I think I'm on the 2nd reading with the Italian group, on the 3rd reading with the English group, and on my 2nd with the Portuguese group. So basically, what could I say about the most memorable? They just surprise you, and I don't know what happened to me. This thing changed me as a person, basically, because I was not sharing this part of my life. I had given up on this part of my life in a large part. So basically, I am leading 2 readings at the moment. I'm co-leading them, and then we discuss. And it is my aim to get people discuss about what we have read and comment upon it. And look, there's loads of things I don't know, of course, and you're never going to get it right. So basically, leading, it's so-called leading, but I just love a bit when you get to talk about it. And the funny thing is, different cultures come together because we come from all over the world, and not necessarily we're reading in our own language, in our own mother tongue. And it's so amazing what different people with different backgrounds, or in different moments, in different stages of our lives, can bring up to the conversation. So Shelby, it can go from literature and style to life in general, because there's no limit to what you could be discussing after reading Ulysses. So I don't know, I'm always surprised because there's always something new. Someone brings up something you had never noticed, and it's great. The one conversation I really loved, the most memorable or most enjoyable for me, was when I was doing a kind of an interview discussion, like we're doing now, with Kathleen Flynn from Berkeley, and she's actually doing a podcast. She's doing a podcast which is great, and it's out for the centenary. And I don't know, like I didn't know which university it was. I'm not aware of what I do sometimes, so I was very relaxed. And then I picked up Proteus of all episodes, and it was amazing. Like, it was an exchange. And you think, a great professor, great academic is listening to you and is kind of exchanging. And she was kind of making me understand new stuff as I was speaking along. It was amazing. And can I say something really, really funny? Like, I miss her. I would be like a bit of a stalker. Like, I just loved talking to her, and it was only 30 minutes, and it could have been 300 minutes, and I really miss her, and it's great. So that was memorable for sure, among many others.
Like this side of your life, or like this aspect. What do you mean by that?
I wanted to set up a book club, and I found a place, and it was a total letdown because people said yes, but it just didn't turn up. It was physical, and it was such a letdown that I really wanted to leave my town. I just, I said, okay, I work in a bank, and that's it. So then I went to Dublin and just saw this thing going on with Joyce. Joyce was my passion from a very early. I was 19 basically when I started reading Joyce, but he was my big passion. But I also love Anglo-Irish, Hiberno, English literature, whatever we want to call it. Anglo-Irish literature. I love Ireland. So, I sort of branched out, experimented so many different things. But that was me reading on my own. And Sweeney's made a difference because I saw people were going there to read one of the most complex books in the whole history of literature. And we were laughing, Shelby. Like, I had an academic approach to it, so I knew how to study about it and be very serious about it. But we were laughing, we were enjoying it. And you can hear all these Dublin voices and the sound of it. And it was sort of, And then, I don't live in Dublin any longer. And when I lived in Dublin, Sweeney's was not there. It was a pharmacy. It was still a pharmacy. It was not a Joycean center. So basically, that was something I would do on holidays when I had time. And then it all went online because of the pandemic. And because of the pandemic, well, there are good side effects to it. I got into these reading groups and it all changed. But it became a big part of my life, even from a human point of view. I made friends and I make time for it. I make time to prepare, because I'm introducing readings. So I make time to prepare and study. So, this takes time and concentration. And it's great. It's like going back to studying again. And I'm 51. So it's just amazing. But it's very separate from the rest from my working day. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know if you've thought of it, but I mean, I think like Joyce worked in a bank too. And I think for a long time he struggled with balancing that with writing Ulysses. So there you are. You're in good company, I think. Very good company.
There's something very strange about Joyce in a way. Like, okay, he's a genius. He was a great genius. I don't use the word often, but I think like Dante, Shakespeare, Joyce, these people were just geniuses. I'm not, of course, but there are parallels in our lives. And he worked in a bank as well, very shortly. And he worked as a teacher in here in Trieste in a school of languages, and I did for a short time. And basically, I think, his home, he had a double home in a way. Of course, home was Paris as well, but Dublin and Trieste, for me, it's the same, only it's the reverse. I went to Dublin when I was younger, then I came back. So it's kind of, there's a link there. And, being from Trieste, and now my mother doesn't have one word of English, but she's read everything. But Joyce has written just everything in translation, whatever has been translated, she's read it. And she had a big passion for him. And even when I was a teenager, she would tell me stories like he was sort of a folkloric character in her stories.
Wow.
because she was in school. She was in school with James Joyce, who
Mhm.
was Stanley's son, because Stanley
What?
stayed here. So he was in the same high school. He was her junior, I think, 1 year.
Mhm.
And so she would tell me about him, but he looked very much like his uncle, and that they had a very strict, old-fashioned Italian teacher that would call him James Joyce, because he
Oh.
refused to pronounce it in the English way. So it was James Joyce. I read James Joyce. And there's plenty of, now, there's signs about Joyce all over the town. It wasn't like that 40 years ago,
Okay.
but now Joyce is everywhere, and you have the statue in a very
Mhm.
specific position in a town. So he's part of the folklore. But because my mother, and that's my mother, like I decided I would go to Dublin when I was 19 to improve my English before starting university. And she didn't buy a guidebook. She gave me Ulysses in Italian
Wow.
as a guide, as an introduction to Dublin.
Wow,
And,
that's amazing.
but I came very fresh to it. Like, I had no idea.
Mhm.
And the book was a very slender guidebook, separate from the actual book, a very slender guidebook with the schemata and everything.
Mhm.
And in Italian, just very little was available, that was
Yeah.
not strictly academic. And I was
Mhm.
like hanging on to this guidebook, and trying to make sense of it. But I didn't understand much, but I enjoyed it. I fell in love with Stephen. Protos was my thing. I don't think I got even 100% of it. But to me, it's like, T.S. Eliot said, poetry can be enjoyed before it is understood. And to me, Protos was poetry. Like just the logic passages being cut out completely. It's very quick going from one thought, one thing to another. And I said, that's the way my brain works, which is probably not very sane, but that's the way. And then it just reminded me of contemporary poetry, which I really loved at the time. So that was my thing.
Oh.
And people always say, we are so relieved by the time we get to Calypso. But I don't know. I wasn't disappointed, but Protus was my thing. Now I'm more in love with Bloom. You see, I'm more mature.
You've learned to love him as you grow up with him? Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Definitely.
I've
Big
seen,
yes.
A yes, as Molly.
Molly.
I love Stephen as well, and right now I'm very annoyed with Bloom. He's a very frustrating character to me, so it's good to know that there will be hope at the end. That I'll learn to like him.
No, I get you. He can be frustrating, and at time I got frustrated with him. Even in recent times, I got frustrated with him, and Nausicaa was the controversial bit for me, to be honest.
Okay.
And but Bloom is life, he's very human, so he's all comprehending, and so I'm getting round to it. Like there's nothing that is not in Bloom, probably. So you see the bad sides and the good sides. And sometimes when I was reading, I was kind of not believing what was said of him if it didn't suit my own image of Bloom. But then if you pay attention to Molly, you realize that something was true. So it's and then he can be frustrating, the way he doesn't react to things. But on the other hand, we see in Cyclops, for example, we see he reacts to what really counts, and he can stand up for what he is and what he believes in. And there's also something very human and very heroic in his being anti-heroic, and something heroic in his non-violence. That's a message that resonates with me so much because it's so unusual, it's so rare. So I just sort of treasure the time I spend with Bloom, which is more than I spent with. No, I'm only joking. No, I'm only thinking of my poor boyfriend, but I am actually spending a lot of time with Bloom. But yeah, as I said, this is a book that takes time. Takes up time and takes up many readings, and when you read aloud, sometimes it makes more sense. It helps. When you read in a group, it helps as well. But sometimes you sort of, your mind may wander, at least mine does, when I'm reading in a group. I'm not concentrated all the time sometimes. And then rereading it, I get bits and pieces. And then don't you think it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle? You find pieces there and pieces here and then just place them together little by little. I'm slow. I'm slow anyway. I'm a slow reader. So yeah, and leader. We're actually reading much, much more slowly than usual. Yeah, since I started leading.
Okay. No, I agree. I think a lot of the reason why I fell in love with Joyce, but specifically Ulysses, is that the patience that it takes to read it.
You know what I think? Sometimes you need to zoom in to understand what is going on. We really need to zoom in because you need notes or podcasts or whatever is available to understand literally what is going on, and then the details. Sometimes you need to zoom out because otherwise you lose the rhythm and the overall picture, and so that takes time as well. You can't I don't think you can skim. And the other thing is, I think it's very good exercise for us, as we are, I think we're all involved in social media and stuff. So our attention span can be slightly affected by that. And Joyce actually asks us to make an effort to be a very active sort of reader. And it sort of balances the other things we're involved in, and we have to be quick and, just react quickly here. Maybe sometimes, I don't know if it happens to you, I'm sure it does. Sometimes you read and then you get stuff after maybe months, it just makes sense after months. And it's like, oh, that was it. And it stays with you. You shouldn't underestimate the power of the books, because actually it's not only Ulysses, but I think Ulysses is I haven't. I'm sort of anticipating. I haven't gone near Finnegan's Wake yet, and so I cannot compare. But if I compare Ulysses to Dubliners, which I love, I absolutely love, I still think Ulysses is funnier. It's more fun.
Yes, I agree. I feel like it's I'm reading Richard Ellman's biography of Joyce right now, and I got to the section where he talks about sort of the background of the dead and that sort of thing. And I find even just thinking about the dead or reading these, short excerpts of it, it just really it makes my heart flutter. But yeah, Ulysses, I'm always just laughing. I don't know. It's very which I think is, I don't know. I think that it's been an acquired taste even culturally. Because isn't it? I've heard the story that when Ulysses came out and it got its first criticisms and people were taking it, quite seriously, and Joyce was kind of like, it's comedic. Like, why isn't anyone laughing? And I feel like from talking to you, it seems like we're getting to that point where we understand the humor a bit more. It like comes to us more.
Yeah, maybe we're less shocked as well, I think.
That's true.
Because if you think, like apart from Nausicaa, but just Nausicaa got him into trouble. I loved him for that, because he got into trouble and then he went on to make Circe even more outrageous. And there's like he was reckless, but it's very bold by the standards. What I think is basically we're saying, oh no, you couldn't see novels with those kinds of themes and representations, etc. I don't think so. Like even Joyce quotes pornographic novels in Ulysses. So pornographic novels were there. But the thing is, he's doing that in high literature. Like his art, because it is art, is doing that. And it's also so comprehensive that he's sort of describing and also celebrating, Bloom defecating, or our friend Stephen having a piss, or, a fart, or whatever. Everything is included in it. Nothing is excluded. So because I felt uneasy about Nausicaa, but I think I have to appreciate that art is embracing that as well. In Proteus, there's that passage of embracing obscurity, the souls, clinging to us in obscurity, and I think we should embrace obscurity. But that is what Joyce is telling us. It's not only light, and it not all is clear, and we should embrace as that. And then, as Catherine Flynn was actually pointing out, he's singing about it. He's making a poem about it. So he's basically singing about obscurity and embracing obscurity. So yeah, all the more exciting for that. But if you think 100 years ago, it must have been an explosion. You have to go back and think, what was there. But what a great era it was from so many points of view. Art, all the arts and science as well. And it was just a great period, very, very, I think, seminal for what came before, but it must have been exciting in so many ways.
Would you want to meet Joyce?
Would I want to meet Joyce? Yeah. I don't think I would like to be his friend. He doesn't he doesn't sound like a great friend to me. And I don't know who would take to me actually. But yes, I would like to. In a way, I sort of feel that in a way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny now. We are reading Nora by Nuala O'Connor, which is a fictional book about Nora. It's a fictional biography of Nora, written from the point of view of Nora.
Okay,
so it's very interesting. We're reading that, and it sounds strange to me. It sounds a bit strange because it's all out there,
Okay.
I'm kind of think it's very straightforward, and I've become accustomed to another sort of getting to know Joyce and his background, which is more like digging. So would see him make a difference. But yeah, I would still like to meet him.
Yeah, it's interesting that those sort of like fictional biographies keep popping up for this family. People want to know them.
And it's also interesting to see how they're kind of addressing the female part of the family.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of heavily referred to in his work, but you still wonder what their point of view was. It would be very interesting to meet Nora, actually, and maybe I'd like to speak my dialect. Because she was actually fluent in my dialect, so it would be nice to have a chat and find out. Would it be like talking to Molly?
There's been any moment or event that changed your understanding of Joyce?
Yeah, I think more than one moment, and I think I still need books to understand Joyce. You know, even in college, you know, I maybe, you know, just Cliff Notes, York Notes, I started with that, but I thought they were very useful. They gave me a key, and that key helped me get into it, and then, you know, I could analyze and read further, and then other people's points of view as well. Other people's points of view are essential. But I am a bookish person, so I need to prop me up with guides. Now, there's a few of them I really love. I'm just I'm grabbing them physically. They're always here. And Anthony Burgess was a great one for me. Rejoice. And then Karen Lawrence, The Odyssey of Style in Ulysses, because I'm so interested in style, and sometimes you don't get that kind of analysis from commentators that are so busy telling you about what is going on or whatever. She's really doing that, and then Ulysses Unbounded, I just started it, by Terence Gillian, I think is a great book. And there is a book I love Declan Kybert. I'm in love with him. And Ulysses and Us is another great book that gave me a more insight into it. And the change has always been, now I'm going to sound crazy to you, but the change has been deeper. Like, it's not been only a matter of understanding the text better, but of understanding things in life better and understanding things about myself as well. Like, it's been a very deep process. I wonder, you know, maybe I wasn't stimulated by other things for maybe 2 years, apart from work, which I don't have a passion for. But so basically, you know, there was no yoga, there was no theater, there was no cinema. So probably reading Joyce was very much at the center of my life. And so it affected my understanding of life in general. This doesn't mean I share all Joyce's views, because I don't, you know, I am a different person. I'm Catholic, for example. I'm a churchgoer, and so that's very interesting. I've been asked, how can you reconcile that with being so Joycean? And actually, I think that helps me understand where he came from and what he rejected, because I come from a similar background. But yes, I think it's there's more levels of understanding, and it's never over. So, you know, even after longer than 30 years, I'm still trying to understand. And, you know, one thing, if ever you go on to teach Joyce, which I would wish for you.
You.
When you have to introduce or lead a group or whatever, there's one step further, because you not only have to understand, but then you have to kind of digest it and make it in little bits and pieces, which you're feeding other people with, without being too heavy. Because at first I was kind of saying too much, which is a big mistake. You just have to kind of make people interested and want to know more. It's an introduction. It's not smothering people with what you've been reading, because you're but it's kind of another step. You have to digest more. And then this experience with the English group, and me not being a native speaker, it's been a great experience. It's a great experience because it's very inclusive. Nobody seems to resent my accent or my lack of vocabulary or whatever. I really feel accepted, and it was a big thing for me, but it was also a big risk for them, because sometimes it's not easy to grab what Joyce is trying to tell you in your own language, or in a sort of known language. So it's kind of, but it has made me different, because I never spoke in a group. I hated speaking in public, and then it sort of liberated me. So
wow. No, I love that. Yeah, no, it's a big change. I find it interesting, and let me know if you don't want to talk about it, because I know it's a little personal, but like I'm Catholic too, and I felt like, so I was raised Catholic, and the first time that I read Ulysses, I think I was a little bit like too young, and so I was just kind of like, Stephen's cool, and so I'm gonna follow him. And so there was a little time when I was like, I'm not Catholic anymore. I'm cool like Stephen, and I don't know. I find like now that I mean, it's only been a couple of years for me, but I've definitely like come back to the faith. And I think that like Joyce's understanding, and like understanding that I disagree with him on that point, has been like a big way for me to make sense of like the religion as a whole, which is wild. But I find too, like, even I don't like things like in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, where he represents Stephen like going to confession and this sort of thing. I think is like, that's often a thing that we're afraid to talk about. And it's just, yes. I remember reading that. It was nuts to me that someone would put this in a book. So I don't know if you want to like speak more to like Joyce's religion, or if it's had that same sort of, if those are kind of like entangled for you the same way that they are for me. But yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I have probably I've never been a rebel. Maybe now I'm starting, but I've never been a great rebel. So I didn't have a time of rejection, anything like that. But I think it's a good challenge, because you get some of your, as you say, some of your own doubts come up on the page all of a sudden. Things you've never dared to discuss even with yourself. So yeah, I think it's kind of a challenge, and I still think it's good. It's good for Catholics. It's good for anyone, because it teaches you to be a free thinker. And then if you are a religious free thinker, it's fine. But it teaches you to reflect upon things, to think them over, which is all good, I think. And sometimes, given religions don't teach you that, you're being taught the norm, and you're not supposed to be discussing it, basically, especially, Catholic has the Catholic faith has an authority recognized authority. So I think it's all good, but I don't feel guilty reading stuff. But for example, now this is personal, but I can't read curses. I can't.
Okay.
I just keep them. So I read aloud, and when I get, there's a little bit in Umeus where actually curses are in Italian. So sometimes, the readers don't get them. But because we are in Italian, and I just couldn't, like the Blessed Virgin, I can't read. So there's a fellow reader of mine in Italian who is the leader of the group also, and he's introduced me to these readings online, and he knows me. So he steps in. He's very sweet, that's very considerate. Every time he steps in and reads instead of me. But where's kind of my limit? I think we all have limits. For example, we experienced another crisis with the N word being used also in the Dead. And because I am not a native speaker, it wouldn't hurt me so much. But I know most of especially the American readers won't say it. Or it pains them. It really pains them to read it. So that's something I learned. But that's Joyce pushing us to the limits in part. In part, it's 100 years ago. So yes, we need to put things in context. We have to remember that words are often said by characters. Because I think what's going on, not many people read the whole book. So many people quote little bits here and there. Joyce said that. Okay, maybe it was not Joyce. For example, it may have been the citizen saying it, or a nameless narrator, or whoever. It's always dangerous not to put things in context, I think. And there's a historical context as well. Although now I must say, we find as readers, especially in the Italian group, we find Joyce was so ahead of his time. Like so many things are still very relevant, and he was definitely ahead of his time, and maybe even ours. And maybe we would need more centuries to understand it.
Yeah.
But what? No, that's my question for you. Which you can ask me. What do your relatives and friends outside the academic world, just your friends and your parents and your relatives, what do they say when you mention Joyce and being so passionate about Joyce?
Oh my gosh. I've actually been interviewing them for this project too. So I think I have a much better idea of that than I would have a couple of weeks ago. I did at the beginning of the pandemic. So in 2020, that summer, I ran like a book club for Ulysses, just sort of so we could like all stay in contact. And some of my friends read it with me then. But apart from that, a lot of my friends and family hadn't read his stuff. And so to them, I feel like James Joyce is almost just like this name for that thing that Shelby does, Yeah, it's not a thing that I have told them, like that personal side of it, of how much it can like make you like question your faith or question how, or not question like in a like non-faithful way, but you know what I mean, like think about it and these challenges. Or how it does change the way that you read and how it introduces you to new people, I think is something that hopefully they kind of see through me, but definitely don't experience.
But they sound very accepting.
Yeah, for sure. I think, my parents especially have always been very It was never that like, oh, literature, you know. It's almost like so, what's the word, like has so much like cultural prestige, you know what I mean, that it's almost
Mm-hmm.
like if you tell someone who's read Joyce that you've read Ulysses, it's like, whoa. But a lot of times, like if you're talking to a non-reader, they don't even know who Joyce is, or don't understand what he, you know, even like sort of these ideas of Ulysses, if that makes sense. And so a lot of times I think when I say that I am studying literature, a lot of people think of, you know, Shakespeare, like you said, is a big one that comes to mind, or things like Jane Austen. And so I think it's sort of, Joyce is this character who's, or his work is very like, it's a tight knit circle of us. I think when you zoom out, that
Yeah.
really like are into it and understand, or not even understand what it was doing, but are trying to understand what it was doing. And so sometimes it can be, oh, well, of course you're studying literature, like just so, but did you have to pick like the random 20th century Irish guy? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, couldn't it have been someone literary? But yeah, I think it's, I don't know. And I hope that's something that I get out of this project too, is that, you know, that that's okay to think of him as the random Irish guy who moved to Paris and Trieste, and you know, it's okay
Yeah.
not to understand his work.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know, it's a matter of surrender, not surrender. Like you
Yeah.
know you're not going to know everything, and that's fine. And what I, you know, people uh, sometimes ask me, what do you do that to yourself? You know, they treat me like a bit of a nerd. And the thing is, he has a fame of being so complex and difficult and unreadable. And I think, you know, that fame is well earned. I'm not saying it's not, but it's there's kind of a repulsion towards Joyce, and especially from my Irish friends.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, yeah, we don't read it basically. We don't read Joyce, and I'm saying it with a sigh. So yeah, it's a tight group. But what I always say is I've dropped out. I don't know how many times, and even when I'm introducing, I say this is where I dropped out, and this is where I dropped out, because it can be very disorienting, you know, especially if you have no guide. And but once you get through it, especially in a group, because you know that gives you motivation. Once you get through it, maybe once or twice, you know, then it's smoother. And I know it sounds mad to be reading it over and over, but and then your mind becomes more flexible. It's exercise. It's
Yes, that's
exercise
so true.
because for example, being in three now, I'm starting. I've just started a course with the James Joyce Centre in Dublin,
Wow.
and it's Ulysses for All with uh, Caroline and they, who is great. She's great fun. And so I'm going to be in 4 different places within the book
Oh,
at the same time.
wow. Oh
She's
my
going to
God.
do one or two episodes a week. And I'm going to start Nausicaa on Thursday, in the middle of Imeos in Italian. And I'm in the middle of Ithaca with the
Ah,
Brazilian group.
mhm.
So that makes my mind very flexible. But
Yeah.
this said, you know, if I open it, I know where I am now because I keep reading it, which is at
Yeah.
first, you know, I couldn't really find my way in it. It felt like
Mhm.
a maze, and then, you know, all the stylistic surprises. I was a bit of a Jane Austen reader. So all these stylistic surprises were kind of disorienting for me, you know,
Mhm.
changing style and changing point of view. But I think it's like a gym. Like once you read Ulysses, you're always going to ask yourself, useful questions as you're reading different books, like who is talking, whose point of view is it, whose voices is it? And when you see bits and pieces of narrations that seem to come up from nowhere, you're going to be aware of them because you exercise yourself with one of the most complex books in history. Do you call it a novel? Because I'm not sure I would.
I was going to ask you this as well. I don't recently I've been calling it an encyclopedic novel. So sort of, I think for me that has helped to recognize that it is not, like you said, it is not like Pride and Prejudice or War and Peace, these things that have prose all the time and a style that it kind of sticks to. But I also think that it's a bit difficult because I feel like with the encyclopedic novel, I don't know, what else does it bring to mind? Things like Pynchon's, like Gravity's Rainbow. I recently read David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, things like that. And I think it's handy to recognize that Ulysses is sort of in that set of these like novels that are kind of acting as encyclopedias too. But also I don't want to put it in this tiny little group where I'm saying, okay, there are these 5 novels or these 5 texts that are encyclopedic novels, and that's, the specific genre. I think it would be a disservice to Ulysses to put it in, that specific of a chokehold almost of genre. Mm-hmm. So I've been using it for now because I think it's useful, especially for people who haven't read it, to give them an idea of what it's doing. But I'm not super satisfied with it,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a good attempt, though.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I would call it, to be honest. No. Yeah, it is a novel for sure, but
okay.
It's so much more at the same time, and it's also disrupting any notion of novel we had before. And just I'm always curious about the influence it had. I'm not sure about it either. I sort of think, for example, when I studied Spanish literature, I remember where actually writers more or less in the style of the stream of consciousness, etc. I wonder about Irish literature. What was the real impact? Maybe on poets, but from a prose point of view, I wouldn't be able to pin it down to. I wouldn't be too sure about it. So it's curious, but yeah.
I don't know. I remember a couple summers ago I read there's a novel called In Dark and Evil Days by Frances She Skeffington, who Joyce knew, went to college together. And I don't know, like it was an interesting book, but it had very like Victorian vibes to me almost. You know what I mean? Like we had our set cast of characters and they did the things, and the Irish or like the British people are bad and we protect the Irish women, and it was well written, but the thing that struck me is it came out in 1916. Well, Skeffington was like murdered during the Easter Rising, so it was published posthumously in 1916. But it's just so weird to me that like something published like the same year as Portrait could be so so normal almost, I guess. And so it was
so traditional. Yeah,
exactly. And so I don't know if it's changed though, reading. I can never remember what it's called. I took an Irish literature course a couple of years ago, and we read Claire Keegan is the author. I totally forget the title of the book, but it was a collection of short stories, much more recent, I think, like in the 21st century. But that I was like, okay, like Joyce is here, she was aware. But I don't know if it had that, like while he was alive, sort of that era of Irish writing. I can never find him in it.
No, I don't think while he was alive. I don't think I think it was afterwards. But yeah, now we're going to have a book coming out soon by John McCourt about the reception of Joyce
that's exciting.
in Ireland. that's exciting. Yeah, I think that's going to give us answers probably. Yeah.
Yes,
And
it'll have
he's
to be
very
fun.
good. Yeah, he's very good in so many ways, but I think he's been able to place him in context like very few other scholars. And he
Mhm.
lived for a very long time in Trieste as well. So, there's so much, and he speaks wonderful Italian. So I think John McCourt, is the one who can put things in context, and it's opening up so many doors again of understanding of a background. And yeah, I think in a way Joyce belongs to so many countries and people, and so he's not only Irish. Well, he
No,
was very European for sure. He Mhm. He
no,
was very Europe oriented himself. But I think he goes beyond Europe. He's just, yeah. And yet he's so Irish, and Ulysses is so much, I think, dipped into Dublin, and just listening to people reading Ulysses with a Dublin accent is gorgeous. Just I sometimes I'm like I'm listening to the readers, and we're very inclusive, and I love everyone. And well, I'm the first who is not a native speaker and whatever. But sometimes when they read with a Dublin accent, it's just amazing. It brings you the sound and the rhythm, and he can reproduce that on page, which is amazing. And it's like it's a novel, but it's also like sometimes I think there are bits and pieces, but are theater-like, very theatrical. Some of them are very cinematographic, and some of them, maybe but more Dubliners reminds me of paintings. But there's a lot of descriptions in Dubliners, and what struck me is that if you read Dubliners in the middle of Ulysses, which happened to me,
wow,
you see how people were described, their physical appearance was described in great detail. And in Ulysses, that doesn't happen much. That's almost gone. So people are portrayed in movement. Sometimes you get bits and pieces of how they look or dressed from other people speaking of them. But it's not in order. It's not traditional. It's Dubliners was very had this painting quality in it. It's very different. But again, what I love about Dubliners and Ulysses is that it's not all stated. It's not all out there. You have to think and maybe research or whatever, read and reread to get it, to have your own epiphany. It's not out there, and there's not only one answer to the questions you are asking yourself about the text. More answers could be right or wrong or whatever. And I think that's a great lesson, even from an existential point of view. It is a great lesson. And I think it's also the artist, big artist, the genius, having trust in his readers. Because bad writers don't trust readers. It's all out there. Sometimes it's stated and restated, and even Jane Austen played with us. She was more traditional, but our Jane Austen played with us. There were red herrings and things, and irony and dramatic irony, but Joyce is pushing it to the limit. And I think probably Finnegan's Wake is beyond the limit. I'm not facing that yet. Later on in life,
it'll happen eventually.
I think it may happen. Yeah, we're busy enough with
Yeah, exactly.
Ulysses.
Yeah, that can wait until one or two of the Ulysses groups reach the end.
Yeah, but then you just other ideas come up, like the writings, the political writings, the journalistic essays or articles by Joyce. That's another thing I would like to explore in a group, because they've been written both in English and in Italian. And it's very interesting because it gives you yet another point of view. Because how critical he was of Ireland, but when he was writing here in Trieste for the local newspaper, he was actually saying some of the things the citizen said in Cyclops. I mean, like, he was not against Ireland at all, and he was very aware of the faults of the British Empire, and he was not a fan of colonialism, and so it's very interesting to read that, because he's saying the same things as the Cyclope, but the Cyclope, the citizen, had only one eye, one point of view. Joyce was more rounded.
What for you will be the most memorable part of our conversation that we've had?
What I had never talked about was the Catholic bit.
Okay.
I loved it.
Oh, good. Me too. It's something new. I'm thinking of actually writing I'm not doing a thesis, but like my big research paper next year about Joyce and like confession and forgiveness, specifically in that Catholic thing. So I was glad that you brought it up. I haven't really gotten to, try that way of talking about Joyce before. So
yeah, we may be not many. We may be a smaller group within a small group. True. But that's interesting, because actually guilt plays a large part in Stephen's consciousness.
That's so true.
And confession is not there for him any longer.
No, it's not. That's interesting. He's able to do it in portrait, but it's not an option in Ulysses, I don't think.
It's not. That non-Serbian sort of severed his life, I think. And there's guilt, and there's no release from that.
No, that's true.
For the moment being. What I think could be fascinating is actually you exploring this thing, and the way in which Bloom has a totally different attitude to the past, and grief and loss and even guilt. Bloom is more mature, but he's also not Catholic.
No.
You see, he doesn't know much about Catholic faith. And so there is a contrast going on.
Yes.
But I can sympathize with Stephen's mother, because her concern was genuine. Do you know what I mean? It was real.
Yes.
For her was real for her, because of, she was very Catholic. So I think it's very dramatic. It's very interesting.
It is.
I'm going to read your essays, Shandy.